what's up?
Now just recording a podcast. What's up with you?
Oh, not too much. You know what, though?
What?
You need a counselor.
Thanks, so do you.
I do need a counselor. You're right.
Hello, welcome back to You Need a Counselor. I'm Julie Johnson, and I am the president and founder of Heart and Solutions. We are a strength-based counseling agency here in Iowa. We offer mental health services and behavioral health counseling services right in your home across the state of Iowa. We're also offering telehealth services right now from your computer or just on your phone. So give us a call if you're listening to this. Take advantage of this telehealth service that's available right now.
And I'm Krista. I am the vice president at Heart and Solutions. I am in charge of the behavioral health department, so I work with kids in home working on different behavioral skills. The mission of our podcast is that You Need a Counselor is a podcast designed for people curious about counseling, but who have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
So if you're on the fence about if you should go to a counselor, like if you've heard about counseling and thought it might be helpful to you, but you're not quite sure, or there are things keeping you from calling, like keep listening. We're going to address any of those concerns, or send us a Facebook message and let us know what is stopping you from signing up for counseling, what's stopping you from experiencing those benefits for yourself or your family. So we post every Sunday night at 5 o'clock. So batch up your laundry. We want to see those laundry piles stacked really, really high. Go ahead and listen to us while you're folding your laundry. Make that a habit in your routine. Also, you can add us to your morning routine. So while you're driving to work in the morning on Monday mornings, if Monday mornings sound really, really terrible to you by Sunday night, go ahead and put us on in the car on your way to work, and then that gives you all week to call your counselor and schedule, or to get in touch with a new counselor and get started with counseling services. We are so excited today. We have our guest today, Aaron Lebold. Hi, Aaron.
Hey, how are you?
Welcome.
Hi, welcome.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
having
for
me on.
being here.
No
Yeah.
problem, I appreciate it.
So I'm going to brag on Aaron a little bit. We're really, really excited to have him here as a guest today. So Aaron is a youth worker. He works with kids, mostly teenagers, and he has a passion for writing. And so he's really using that talent of writing to spread this message and to help just multiple people. Aaron worked for 8 years as a successful addictions counselor, primarily working with teenagers and kids. Aaron has now transitioned to writing, and he does a daily blog. He has also completed 2 novels, and the second novel that he's come out with is called Genocide. And so we're really excited to hear more about what that is and what that's about. I also want to know about your first novel, and if you have any other ones that you're working on now. So what else should we know about you, Aaron?
Well, my first novel is actually not published yet. It's going to be soon, but it's actually primarily about addictions. It was, I started writing it right at the end of my time as an addictions counselor. So a lot of the stories, like a lot of the characters are inspired by real people, not their stories, but like a lot of the kids at the facility, when I told them I was going to write, a lot of them were like, oh, you got to put me in your book. So I use a lot of their names, like they're just their first names, but like the stories are made up, but they could be true. I mean, you hear a lot of stories over the years doing this kind of work. So kind of learned to develop a little bit of empathy towards where some of these guys come from and what they've been through. And it's kind of inspiring to think about what they've been able to get through and, you know what I mean, come out on the other side. So it's pretty impressive, actually.
Wow. And then what is Genocide about?
Genocide is a bit darker. So the first half is about like kind of the same idea of like a kid who's got a dysfunctional family and is put into really unfortunate circumstances. It's more emotional based. I've had a lot of people tell me that I've had some people tell me they almost cried during the first part of it. And then the second half is, to be honest, more just like violence, more of like the person that was wronged getting away from the people and having his revenge on the people that did him wrong. So it's kind of like 2 different vibes through the story.
So it's fiction and it's like action, kind of suspense. How is he going to get out of this situation kind of stuff? But it also touches on issues of addiction, it sounds like.
That one, yeah, there's some addiction in it. It's more about like prostitution and gang related stuff and that kind of thing. The first book is all about addiction, but Genocide is more about that kind of stuff. So
yeah, Chris and I like books that make us cry.
Yeah. We all need to read it.
It's always nice to have a good cry.
So the point of our podcast obviously is to talk about why we all need counselors and why everyone could benefit from counseling. So can you let us know, why do you need a counselor?
This was one of those things that when I was younger, I think I really could have benefited from, but for some reason I was very opposed to the idea. I saw a counselor when I was in my 20s, but I wasn't really feeling like I needed much help, so I didn't get a lot out of it. But right around the time I left the rehab, I started seeing one, and I actually really wanted to put in some effort and really learned a lot about myself. I think the biggest thing is being open and wanting to have the help. So kind of once you get over that big element of it, maintenance is still something that's really good to be able to use a counselor for. Like just having someone to talk to that's neutral is something that I found really helps you kind of keep things into perspective just of your everyday life.
Oh, wow. How did you make that transition from somebody who thought they maybe could use a counselor but didn't really want to because of barriers, to somebody who thought, well, I'm going to do it, but I'm not really fully invested, into somebody who was able to take full advantage of the benefits of counseling?
Well, if I'm going to be completely honest, the first time I had to do it, it was court ordered.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't really too into it. I mean, back then I was still using drugs and I was still in active addiction myself. So I wasn't really, I don't know if I wasn't quite ready to face what I had to face. But the second time, I mean, I've also struggled with depression my whole life, but I really ignored that when I was younger and like kind of put the emphasis on other things, kind of saying that it wasn't mental health, it was just circumstance. And when I was about to leave the rehab, I went on a stress leave for a little bit, and before I ended up quitting. And part of that was seeing a counselor. And I made the decision, like, if I'm in, I'm going to be all in. I'm going to just like go in there and be completely honest and put everything on the table and be open to hearing what they say. And it just kind of felt like the right thing to do, because I was also, being an addictions counselor was my life. So it was like, if I'm going to be debating moving past this, I need to legitimately feel ready and feel confident that I'm making the right choice, because it was a really difficult decision to make. So I think just coming to a point in my life where I felt like I could legitimately use some help. If I do something, I like to do it right. So being a counselor, I know what that looks like. So I was just able to apply my knowledge in my own life, which I did a lot of times as a counselor over the years. I mean, it was a bit tricky, but at the same time, it was what I knew I needed to do. So that made it a little bit easier for me.
I love that idea of, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And if I'm going to invest my time in counseling, I want to see that great return. So I want to be as honest and open as possible. And I want to put in the work and the vulnerability that it takes to be able to process those things out. And what I also love about your story is that when you said, yep, I'm all in, I'm gonna do this thing right, it wasn't because something was like wrong with you. Like you were making a career change into something great. You had these stories that you had been writing, and you decided to kind of take that jump and transition into something that you're passionate about. And so it's not that something was wrong with you and you knew, oh, you need to go see a counselor, but you were making this big transition, and you recognized that, hey, transitions are hard. Like even good ones, sometimes especially good ones, are hard on us. And you were able to take advantage of that. And do you feel like that helped you in that transition?
Yeah, actually, I was kind of still not sure exactly what direction I was going at that time. One of the things I talked about with my counselor was my up and down moods that I had all the time and that kind of thing. And we talked about journaling. So I actually took the idea of journaling and I kind of enhanced it myself, and I started writing out like my memoirs, basically, like my life story. So I started doing that every day on doing blogs about it. So I just write a little chunk of my life, starting with as young as I could remember and going forward. It was liberating to be able to kind of get it out there, and even like making it public was something that I was a little reluctant to do, but at the same time, it made it even more liberating. It just kind of got it out there, so it was off of me and not that kind of a weight on me. And it helped me really analyze things from more of my current point of view than my point of view from back then, because back then I would have probably told the story a lot differently. And that is actually one of the things that motivated me to write a novel. Before that, I didn't really have the confidence to do it, or I don't know what it was. I've always enjoyed writing, but I never thought about doing a novel. But after doing my life story and having like good feedback on it, and people say, you're a good writer, it kind of gave me a bit more confidence to move forward with trying that out.
The best art really impacts the artist and then impacts the viewer. So I love that it wasn't just about, sometimes people say, well, I want to write a book because I want to be an author. But for you, the process of writing was therapeutic, and you were able, it sounds like you did some narrative techniques in your counseling sessions, and that you were able to see those experiences that we all hold in our mind at the age that we were, until we externally process that out. And then we can look at it from the age that we are now, with all of the experiences and life lessons that we've had in the meantime. So things that I remember from when I was 6 years old, and I have feelings associated with those memories from when I was 6 years old, well, I understood it at a 6-year-old level. So my daughter's 4. And she probably, if she thinks back on, this morning, for example, right? My mom is so mean. She woke me up when I was trying to sleep, right? At a 4-year-old level, like, yeah, that's mean. That's hard, And so, but then if she's writing that as an adult, she sees it kind of more the way that I see it, of, hey, let's get up, let's start our day. So it's just so important for us to be able to integrate our life experiences and the things that we understand now and the things that we know now with those memories. We don't lose those memories, we just understand them in a different way. And I think that's what writing has done for you.
And I think you're absolutely right with that. When you see things as a younger kid, everything looks so much bigger, right? But if you don't ever deal with it, it kind of grows with you. So when you're an adult, it's like, it still feels like it's that big. But until you're able to kind of go back into it and process it, you're not able to minimize it down to, what it actually could be. I mean, sometimes it could be big. I mean, everybody's situation is different, right? But I like the way you said that like when something happens when you're younger, you see it from that perspective, and it kind of remains in that perspective until you're able to look at it differently, right? So that's a good point.
I was at my parents' house like maybe 2 years ago, and we were going through the stuff in their attic, and there was this kangaroo, like this Kanga from Winnie the Pooh, she had like the little roo in her pouch. Yeah. And I found this kangaroo, and I was so excited because I have such great memories of riding this kangaroo around. And so it was, it was big, and I was small. And so I could sit on it and hop around on it and put the little roo in the pouch and put my little like quarters in the pouch and stuff. And in my mind, that kangaroo was huge, right? Like it's probably 2 feet tall, maybe like 2.5 feet tall in reality. But to me at that time, it was like a full-size kangaroo because I could ride around on it. And so seeing that kangaroo now at the age of, 33 at the time, I was like, oh, this is not the same kangaroo that I see in my mind, right? In my mind, it's like a 6-foot kangaroo, right? Because I'm taller. I'm 5'4" now. So it was so much bigger than me. And I think in the same way, those memories, those experiences that we have when we are those ages, when we don't understand, when we don't have experience or we don't have power in our lives, it can really grow, like you said, grow with us. I think that's such a great way to describe it, that experience grows and that memory grows. But then when we look at it again and dig it out from our parents' attic, and we go, oh, this is super cute, but it's like 2 feet tall, right? It's not a giant kangaroo. And the other thing is that we get to see ourselves from that perspective. So a lot of times we have a lot of regrets, and we have a lot of self-image messages that we continue to hold about ourselves, because maybe when we were 5, we were powerless because when you're 5, you're powerless, right?
Yeah.
So maybe something happened that was outside of our control. And in our 5-year-old mind, we felt like we should have been able to stop that, or we should have been able to, prevent that from happening, or we should have done something different than we did, right? And we can carry that with us, that idea of like, I'm a powerless person, because if I was more powerful, I could have stopped this thing from happening, right? Or I could have changed the outcome of it. But then when we look back at it and we go, wait a minute, that's a 5-year-old. We think it's us at this age, and we go, why didn't I do this or that? Because we were 5. And so if I look at a 5-year-old, I go, okay, would I expect a 5-year-old to make a different choice, or to, stop something from happening, or to have power and control over a situation? No. I would never expect that of a 5-year-old. Why do I expect that of the 5-year-old version of myself?
Yeah, that's a very good point, for sure.
Do you mind sharing with us what it was like to do court-appointed therapy? That's a brand new perspective for this podcast.
It was just the same as normal counseling, I think, but it was like something I just had to do and report to my probation officer that I had done it. But I went there with, I don't know, I felt like I knew what direction I was going in life anyway, and I didn't really feel like I needed a lot of guidance, but I was also kind of stubborn back then, and I was still on drugs and stuff. So, it was okay, but I kind of was able to divert the conversation into things that were easier to talk about, kind of putting on the facade that I was doing what I needed to do, but not really hitting the things that I probably should have actually been hitting. So, the counseling aspect just a regular counselor, and everything to that aspect was just pretty much normal. But me going into it had a different end game, I guess, a different goal as to what I wanted to accomplish. I was just going there, and I'm pretty good with words if I need to be. So I could, just kind of talked about the things that were sort of more within my comfort level, and got through it that way. So, to say it didn't help, it was more me too, that wasn't at a point where I really was open to doing what I needed to do in order for it to help.
It takes that factor for it to be really useful to us, or for it to be successful for us, and that factor is something that the counselor can't even see. The counselor, they might kind of have an inkling of like, this person maybe isn't super invested, right? But the only person who knows that for sure, 100%, is ourselves. We're the only one who knows, am I going into this with an open mind? Am I going into this with the desire for this to be helpful to me or not? And a lot of times what we hear from people who have tried counseling before and then don't want to go back because they say, oh, it wasn't helpful. What we hear a lot of times is that they were going for an external reason. They were going because their partner wanted them to go, or they were going because they were court ordered, or their parent wanted them to go, their parent wanted them to change something about themselves. And when we put that external factor on the sessions, then it kind of just becomes like checking a box, right? Like, oh, I checked that box, they asked me a question and I answered it. But maybe not in a way that's answering it in a way that's helpful to me. And in order for that to happen, we have to be really, really invested in letting that happen.
I think a lot of people that first go see counselors have something that's kind of underlying in their life that's starting to affect them in one way or another, right? It could be something that comes up periodically. It could be something that they struggle with every day. And until you actually touch on that, it doesn't go anywhere, right? Like counseling isn't something like magic where you can just walk into the room and suddenly you're better, right? Like a counselor only knows what you allow them to know. So if you go into a counselor and you lie or make up problems that aren't real and spend the time focusing on problems that are fabricated, then your real problem, I don't know. I've seen a lot of kids do that, right? Like they'd come in and just to show their parents that they were doing the work, right? But they'd just make stuff up or touch on stuff that wasn't important and keep the real things buried. And some of them, it's like they felt like they were getting away with something, but it's like, I've had kids apologize to me at the end of their program and be like, I wasn't really totally honest. It's like, yeah, well, that's your decision and you're the one that's going to have to live with that, right? Like, it doesn't change my life whatsoever if you lie to me. Like it doesn't make a difference, right? But it matters to you. And if you go in and talk about things that aren't relevant and then you don't feel any better, it's kind of, you can't really be surprised.
It makes me think about if we spend the time to go to the doctor and, we're having really bad headaches, for example, but we go into the doctor because somebody says, hey, you should go into the doctor about those headaches. And we go in and he asks what's going on. And we say, oh, I have allergies and, like maybe I'm not sleeping so well. And, we miss the opportunity to be able to have that person walk us through what we need to do. So if we go in and we say, my head hurts, and he says, well, when does it hurt? And we tell him like mostly in the mornings or this and that, then they've got the information that they need to be able to lead us through that process. But if I go in there and I just talk about my seasonal allergies and I talk about the weather with him, I'm missing the opportunity to make a change.
Use it. I may just carry on with your analogy here for a second. So if you're someone that's lived with these headaches for your life, and they kind of become almost a part of you. And this is just my experience personally when I was younger, right? So it's almost like there's part of you that fears if you lose that, you're going to lose part of yourself. Like if you go and you actually get that treated, who are you going to be without those as such an identifiable factor of your personality, right? So I think that like, it's a good point. And for somebody, it kind of goes back to the whole thinking back and now thing. Like as someone now in hindsight, as people that have dealt with our issues, it's a lot easier to be able to be like, you should just go and do it, right? But sometimes it's hard we forget that like how scary that can be for people and how daunting the task is of actually giving up almost part of you that you've become accustomed to over years and years and years, or whatever the case may be. I mean, everybody's different, but like this is kind of my experience, right? Like depression for me was something that was like part of who I am, and there was almost a fear that like if I were to treat that, would I still be creative? Like you kind of come up with a lot of different things in your mind, like barriers as to reasons why you don't have to actually become exposed and don't actually have to get to the root of what's bothering you and address it, right? So I don't know. I think it's definitely easier said than done to just be able to walk in and say, this is what the problem is. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that can do it, but some people that really struggle, it's not that easy. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I mean, I respect that, but at the same time, you want to do your best to encourage them, but you also have to acknowledge that it's probably going to take some time.
And that's what I love so much about your story, because you weren't that person who just walked in and said, yes, counseling's for me, I'm doing this, right? But you also didn't give up on it. You didn't let the experiences of previous counseling sessions deter you from utilizing that service when you did need it and when you were ready. And so I really love to see that progression, between, hey, I kind of just did it, and then I thought about doing it, but I didn't do it. And then I did it, but I didn't really do it. And then kind of coming through that progression, because I do think it shows that it is a progression. In my first counseling sessions when I was 13, I mean, you would have thought they were court appointed, okay? I would not talk to this counselor whatsoever. That's totally different than the counselor I have now, where I cannot wait to talk to her. But it's a progression, and everybody goes through that progression. But what I love about your story is that you didn't let that deter you. You didn't let that rob you of the benefits that you now have gained. Like you're a writer. I mean, that's amazing. That's something that people go their entire lives thinking, oh, I would really like to write, but this, right? Like all of these barriers that get to that, and you're doing it. And that's really amazing. And so I just love that, your story can really help people who are in either that first phase where you were like, maybe, but no. And then the second phase of well, I have to go, or I'm just going to prove something to myself in terms of it doesn't work, right? Sometimes that's the case. That's why people are going. And so if somebody's in that phase too, I just love that you've been there. You know what that's like. And you've also been able to turn that around and be able to utilize counseling to your benefit.
I think part of the problem is that some people see visiting a counselor as like some sort of a weakness, or people have a difficult time asking for help. And I think that was a big part of me as well. Going as an addictions counselor and then telling like I had the information, I kind of knew, you know what I mean, what was supposed to be sort of done, but it didn't mean I applied it in my own life. But over time, like the more I said it with kids, and I had kids ask me a lot of questions about my personal life, and I felt like, I don't care. I've got nothing to hide. I'll share my experiences with them. And I mean, even that was like a big part of getting more comfortable with it. You know what I mean? Like I shared some things that I wasn't necessarily comfortable sharing with, but I just said, you know what, like I'm asking these guys to do it. Like, you know what I mean? I'll do it with them too, right? It took me a while. And then even after a few years at the rehab, I felt like I was better, and like without going to counseling. And then my wife was kind of like, you still have really bad depression bouts. And I'd be like, the problem with it is that I'd go through it and it'd be really bad, but as soon as it was over, it's like I'd block it out of my mind or something, and I'd forget about it. So like if you look at my medical history over years, it's like antidepressants 2 weeks, drop them. You know what I mean? If you like next year or something, antidepressants, couple weeks, drop them. I never stayed on anything for very long because I'd go in when I was at my worst, and then as soon as I started feeling better, it'd be like, I don't need this, and I'd just get rid of it, right? So, but her hindsight too was like, well, what about this time and this time and this time? And it's like, oh, like I never really thought about that. So her
like, I'm not trying to think about those right now.
Yeah, exactly, right?
I'm doing good right now.
Yeah.
Kind of made me realize like I'm not doing as well as I thought, and that was a big part. Her input was a big part too of why I put so much effort in when I went to the counselor in my 30s, because I was like, she knows me best and she's seeing this stuff and she's not going to lie to me about it. And you know what I mean? So even my perspectives then were still a little skewed, where I was thinking everything was okay when it wasn't necessarily okay, completely okay. Things were better, but I still had something I had to deal with.
I really love that idea of, what you're talking about in terms of like, we have kind of these cycles of functioning and of mental well-being. And, no matter what our diagnosis is, no matter what our life is, we have these cycles. And what it reminds me of is like getting our oil changed on our car. So if we go for years and we don't get our oil changed when we regularly should, our car's going to break down. And then we're going to have this really bad time with our car of like, oh my gosh, my car doesn't work and I need to find rides and all of that. And then we get our car repaired. And then we continue to drive it and we think everything's great because our car runs now and everything. And so somebody's like, oh, get an oil check. And we're like, no, my car's running great. And then we don't do it. Our car breaks down again, right? And we go, oh my gosh, my car's broken down. And then we call the mechanic and then we do it. And I think that for so many of us, that's the cycle for our mental health well-being as well, right? We want to go, when we get to those lower cycles, we go, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. I need some help. I need some support. But then when things go back to normal and our car is running fine, then it's more difficult for us. We don't necessarily make the connection always. And so we don't always go and get the oil changed when the car is running fine, so that we don't have as bad of symptoms when we do have those lower spots. So I think that's such a great point of like, yeah, we do have those cycles and it is harder for us to do it. But when the car's running is the easiest time to get an oil change because you can drive it in there instead of having to get it towed into the repair shop, right? And it's cheaper to do it on a regular basis than to have to get it towed and have to get it fixed and all of that every time that happens.
I think as people, a lot of times, like what you're saying, we kind of respond to crisis. And if it's something we can get through on our own, we just say, I'm going to push through this on my own. And then, you know what I mean? So it kind of sometimes, for a lot of people, takes the point of crisis for us to act on it. And the other part of that too that I think is important is a lot of the times people in our lives might be telling us something and we don't want to listen to what they're saying, right? So, I mean, even just given your analogy there, if someone were to be like, after, didn't you just get it done 3 months ago? Shouldn't you be going in? And a lot of times, I mean, maybe these people don't necessarily approach you in the way that works for you, you know what I mean? But it could be valid. You know what I mean? Like, I spent a lot of time not listening to anybody else about a lot of that kind of stuff. And then, you know, when I did listen to my wife and I agreed with what she was saying, acknowledged it and dealt with it, it was really helpful. So, I mean, if you're someone out there who has loved ones that are telling you you need to see a counselor, you know, they're probably not doing it to be a jerk, even if that's kind of the way that you're perceiving them, right? So I'm sure a lot of people, especially younger people, their parents kind of push them into this kind of thing. And I've seen that a lot. I've seen a lot. I mean, our program was volunteer, but you know, that's kind of a relative term, because sometimes it was either go to treatment or go to jail, or go to treatment or get kicked out of the house. So like, yeah, they were there voluntarily, but their other options weren't necessarily the best. And a lot of them would come in, and it would take at least 2 months usually for them to start to actually buy into the program and start really working it. So, I mean, you've got a couple months of, you know, acting up and not talking, and you know what I mean? Like, and they're probably there because they have no choice, you know? Yeah. I think it's important to listen to what other people say, even if you don't necessarily agree with it. To at least take it into consideration. I mean, I'm sure there's issues where someone's saying, oh, you need help, and somebody is okay. Typically, people have a different perspective of you than you have of yourself, and may see some things about you that you either choose not to see or are unable to see. So I don't know. If someone you care about is offering you that advice that you should go see somebody, then I think it's something you should at least consider.
Absolutely. Yeah, that outside perspective is so important. We all have our blind spots, right? So I can't see the back of my head right now. If somebody puts a kick me sign on my back, I have no idea that it's there. And so those blind spots that we have for ourselves are so important. And it's not comfortable when somebody points those out to us, even if it's helping us. So if I have a kick me sign on my back and everybody's like pointing and laughing and trying to kick me in the butt, like, that's not helpful to me. I don't like that. He comes up to me and says, you have a kick me sign on your back, right? Even if they say it rude, it's still helpful for me to know that I have a kick me sign on my back so that I can go and do something about it if I want to. I think that's such a great point about like the ability for other people to see what's going on with us. And it's not comfortable. Like, I'm going to be embarrassed if Chris is like, Julie, you have a kick me sign on your back. I'm going to be embarrassed about that. I'm not going to be feeling great about Krista in that moment, right? Because part of me is going to be like, yeah, I'm grateful she told me whatever. But also part of me is embarrassed about like, oh, Krista now knows, and she said something to me about it, right? So I might have some like resistance feelings about that, but ultimately it is better for me to know so I can choose to do something about it or not. And at least now I'm in control. I'm making the decision what I want to do about it or not do about it. What you were talking about too, about the crisis cycle and kind of getting into that, like, okay, it's a crisis. Okay, now it's fine. Now it's a crisis. It reminds me too of what you were talking about before, about that fear of letting go of certain pieces or certain symptoms that we're having or certain patterns in our lives. And it reminds me of, I mean, so when I was a child, I had social anxiety. I did not talk to anybody, not my counselor, but like literally not anybody. Didn't want to talk to anybody. And I thought that was just like my personality. Like if you said, oh, who are these kids? You'd say like either, oh, she's the Asian one or she's the quiet one or sometimes both. Like that's how you describe me. And so like that was such a big part of my personality. Like you were saying with depression, I just thought I was just a quiet person, right? And I didn't realize who I was actually supposed to be, who I would thrive being is not somebody hindered by social anxiety, but I really didn't even know. So there are kind of two pieces of this. In that situation, I didn't even know that that was a diagnosis that I could get treatment for and that I could work through and not have those symptoms anymore. I literally just thought like, that's who I am as a person. So in that situation, I didn't even know. I actually worked through a 12-step program. I'm still in a 12-step program right now. When I was working through my 4th step inventory, I had to confront a lot of fears. And I had to, in my 5th and 6th and 7th, I had to want or ask for those fears to be removed from me. And I was afraid of losing my fears. And I remember saying to my sponsor, and I remember saying to different people in my program, like, what is going to drive me if I don't have my fears? If I'm not afraid of my business closing and losing my house and being homeless and my daughter being taken away from me and dying of starvation under a bridge, if I'm not afraid of that, why am I going to wake up in the morning? Like, why would I do anything in my life, right? And somebody said, is every decision you make driven by fear? And I said, yeah. Like, what other motivation is there? And she was like, well, love, like caring for things. And I said, yeah, but like those are all tied into the fear. Like, I love my daughter, and so I like feed her and I, spend time with her and I hang out with her. I do those things out of love, sure. But there's also the flip side of that, which is fear, which is like, if I don't take her to the playground, I'm missing out on a day in the life where she's 4 and she's not going to be 4 forever. And before I know it, she's going to be going to college, and like, I better take her. Like, if she wants to go, I got to take her. Those fears were so embedded into my daily decision making, into like, what would I wear in the morning? What would I eat in the morning? Like, where would I go? What would I do? What is my 5-year plan? What is my 10-year plan? Like, they were so embedded with the fears that I was making the connection that the fears were causing me to be successful or motivated, right? And to do things that I needed to do. I had it backwards. The fears were stopping me from doing a lot of the things that I wanted to do, right? But I thought that they were causing me to do the things that I was still able to do. I had it totally backwards, but I just remember being so afraid of letting go of my fears. And I also remember thinking, like, if I ask my higher power to remove this fear, like, what is left? If I ask him to remove my selfishness and my self-seeking, my dishonesty and my fear, who am I? Like, what is going to be left? And am I going to like that person or not? I have no idea, because like, it's like meeting a stranger. So what you were talking about like that hindrance of not wanting to always get the treatment that we need or that might help us out because of fear of losing identity, like losing who we believe that we are, or losing the lifestyle that we have. I mean, when we go from crisis to okay and crisis to okay, like, there are actually a lot of chemical payoffs, like brain chemistry payoffs to that cycle. And so sometimes losing that cycle can be kind of like mundane then, right? Like, oh, I don't have these crisis, horrible situations, but I also don't have those like, oh, it's okay. Like, it's all right, I can relax, I can let go now, it's okay. I don't have those moments either. And so we also want to look at, like, even when we make positive changes in our life, even when we get that support and counseling, there are certain things that it's really scary to let go of in order to move to that next level of wellness for ourselves.
And I think one of the important things too that you touched on is, like, when you don't talk to anybody and you just kind of leave everything in your own mind, the only perspective you have is your own. So like, you sitting there, like when you're younger, saying like, you just get used to the social anxiety and stuff. And the same is going back to what you said about the 5-year-old believing that they had done something wrong. If you don't ever talk about that, those perceptions are the only perceptions you have. So if your perception is like, I'm a bad person, or I did this wrong, or I could have done better, and you hang on to that and live with that, then you're going to just continue to believe that, right? So, I mean, that's kind of the power of talking. And sometimes even saying something out loud makes you look at it a little bit differently. Like, you can think in your mind from the time you're 5 to the time you're 20 that you did something wrong. But maybe when you're 20, you say, well, when I was 5, I should have done more. And then you kind of, well, that doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, you kind of have that realization of like, when I say it out loud, I don't know if I could have done any more when I was 5, and change the perspective that way, right? So I think that's where counseling, even just talking to people in general, helps. I mean, like if you have like reservations about seeing a counselor, you can still talk to somebody that you trust. Like having somebody who's qualified and certified is good, but the biggest part of a counselor is just listening. And you know what I mean? Like sometimes like, a good counselor will prompt with open-ended questions and get you to kind of elaborate on things really. But like when you go to a counselor, you're the one who's doing the work. So even if you're more comfortable doing that with a friend or something to start out with, like that's something that's definitely a possibility, right? I think the benefit to a counselor is that it's not going anywhere. If you're worried about it getting spread around, like a counselor is going to keep that information, you know what I mean, out of anybody else's minds. That perspective thing is a big thing, because if you don't talk, then the only perspective you have is the one that you've given yourself, which oftentimes isn't necessarily the most uplifting or positive.
My husband used to travel for work. He used to do sales across the country. And so his territory was like Iowa down to Florida to Maine. And so he'd be in the car and in hotels like 4 nights out of the week. And he would come home and sometimes he'd call me from the road and be like, I just need to say some things. Because I've been alone with my own thoughts now for this 5-hour drive, 6-hour drive. And I've heard that from truck drivers too, where, when you're alone in the car by yourself, you hear your own thoughts quite a bit and you get that repetition quite a bit, to the point sometimes where you need an outside perspective on something. Yeah. So I think that's such a great point there too. Yeah, I just really love your experience, and I just really thank you for sharing it. And I would love to have you on the show again if you'd be willing, because I think there's so much more about your story that could be helpful to our listeners as well.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So Aaron Lebold, how can people find you? How can people find your book? How can people find your blog? How can people find you and your work?
My book is available on Amazon and at my publisher's website, Breaking Rules Publishing. If you just look up my name, Aaron Lebold, you'll find Genocide on Amazon. I have an author page, which is Aaron Lebold Blogs. I haven't been doing the blogs as frequently as I used to, just because I've been focusing more on working on novels. But that's my author page, and I have links to my blogs on there too. They're on WordPress, but I don't know off the top of my head what the WordPress address is.
We'll link that in the description of the show so that everybody can find those links and can connect with Aaron and read his book. And Krista and I are going to read it, and we're going to let you know if we cry, which we probably will, because we're counselors and seriously, we cry at everything. So awesome. Do you think that would be a good book club book?
I don't know. I mean, it's definitely not for everybody because of the violence aspect of it, but I think it'd be a good discussion piece. I mean, it touches on some sensitive subjects, and try to touch on those subjects gingerly, but they're still there, so that could be triggering for some people that have that sort of experience. But again, as counselors, we kind of know that being triggered is part of the process of dealing with it and getting past it and moving, you know what I mean? So I don't really have any apologies if I trigger you. I think if it triggers you, then you should talk about it with somebody. You know what I mean? It wasn't my book that did it. It was your past, and you can deal with your past by reaching out for help. So it kind of shows the progression of an addict. So it kind of helps people understand a little bit how it can go from small things to bigger things. That one I'm probably putting out in August, I think, also with Breaking Rules Publishing. So that one will be available soon.
So that one's called
Demons Among Us.
Demons Among Us. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, we'll be looking forward to that one too. Thank you so much, Aaron. That was really, really helpful. That was great.
Yeah, it was really good. We'll have to have you on when your second book comes out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
If you are in Iowa and interested in contacting Heart and Solutions for either therapy or behavioral health counseling for kids, you can give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Our email address is also help@heartandsolutions.net, or you can look us up on facebook.com/heartandsolutions.
And you can find my book, Breathing Through the Year, at www.storiesfromtheheart.shop. That is breathing techniques that are holiday themed, and those are for preschoolers. So typically age 2 to 6 can do those breathing techniques with the whole family. We post every Sunday night at 5 p.m. So set your timers or do a Google appointment. Go ahead and turn us on at 5 o'clock on Sunday nights. You can also send us questions to our Facebook page. So you can go to www.facebook.com/you-need-a-counselor, and you will find our Facebook page there. Send us a Facebook message, or you can DM us on Instagram as well. Send us any questions that you have or concerns that you have about counseling. We will keep those anonymous, but we can read those on the show and we can talk through your concerns as well.
My name is Aaron Lebold. I am an ex-drug addict, an ex-counselor, and a current author, and I need a counselor.
All right, I'm Krista Brown.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.